Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. The Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris in ASEAN region was adopted by leaders of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which includes 4 of the world's top polluters. ASEAN members Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam and Thailand, along with the worst offender China, throw the most plastic waste into oceans, according to a 2015 report co-authored by environmental campaigner Ocean Conservancy. Now, the declaration was commended by environmentalists as a good first step for the region, though doubts remain that implementation will be a challenge because the group has a code of non-interference that would leave necessary policy making in the hands of individual member countries. Neither the declaration nor its accompanying framework of action specifically mentions bans on single-use plastic or imports of foreign waste, as environmental groups previously demanded ahead of the summit. The declaration came ahead of this week's G20 summit in Japan, which assembles 20 major economies and will also aim to tackle marine plastic pollution. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze how to tackle ocean pollution. Joining me on the program today are Shilkant Sharma, former ambassador, Shamlal Kumar Sarkar, Senior Director, Natural Resource and Climate, the Energy and Resources Institute, and also joining us on the program today, Simran Sodhi, Foreign Affairs Journalist. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Let me begin first with you, SK Sarkar, and try and analyze and let's try and understand how big a problem really is ocean pollution.
The problem is enormous in the sense that every year, on an average, 4 to 12 million metric ton of plastic goes into the sea. And 80% of the land discharge goes into the sea in the form of plastic waste. So, it is a huge task for any individual countries to check this menace of plastic pollution. Take the case of India. India generates about 62 million tons of waste every year, of which the 10 to 12% are plastic waste. And these plastic waste also are contributed by the single-use plastic. And single-use plastic, the problem is that it is not an attractive in the case of the rag pickers. The rag pickers they have no incentives to collect and recycle and reprocessing it. So, those plastic which are not reprocessed are going to the sea in the form of biodegradable materials. And as you know, biodegradable means it does not degrade over a number of years. It could be 1,000 years. So, the pollution from plastic is one of the big menace as far as the ocean pollution is concerned. There are other pollution from in the ocean. For example, the ship. The pollution from the ship itself is also a constitute pollution in this. There will be oil spill in the sea. That will constitute polluted atmosphere in the sea. There is a convention called MARPOL Convention, where the ship pollution is involved. India is not a signatory to that convention. There are other countries who are signatory, but since because of the shipbreaking activity India follow, we are not a contributory to this convention. So, overall the picture is not very happy in the sense that there are many steps a country has to take to check the menace of pollution.
Okay, let me just interrupt you there and ask you, has irreparable damage been done?
Obviously, because the plastic which has gone already into the ocean, how to remove those? So, you have to collect it, you have to collect from the ocean itself, which is very costly. Not every country can afford to collect the plastic itself from the ocean itself.
Right.
So, it is very costly.
Sure. Okay, we'll talk about technologies and what needs to be done really as far as this gigantic problem is concerned a little later on in the program. Let me now introduce Jyoti Parekh, Executive Director, Integrated Research and Action for Development on the program. Professor Parekh, the 10 member ASEAN bloc has decided to do something as far as tackling ocean pollution is concerned, and in the declaration they have said that they are going to combat marine debris in the ASEAN region. Is that a good start?
Of course, it's a good start, and the current conventions are mainly ship-based conventions, MARPOL, UNCLOS, and they are looking at the law of the sea and prevention of pollution from ships. But we have also considerable amount of land-based pollution. So we need to have people's involvement in this, and we need to examine all our consumption processes and production processes, starting from manufacturing point, and even before that mining and other points, and then over the entire value chain, where can we reduce our waste. So it's not about just recycling, but reducing and reusing and many other steps in between. And I'm glad that East Asian people are, South and East Asian people are getting together, because they are responsible for much larger pollution than I realized, and there is something like 60 to 80%. And plastic production itself is expected to double to 600 million tons from current 300 million tons. So where is it all going to be? And so we need to now, and the new uses are coming up every day now, much more. Many of the party cutlery and plates, it's like that. Also many places where repackaging and the food ordering business is been growing, and everything comes with very big plastic containers, and every day I see new use of plastic containers, and it's really scary, frankly.
Okay, all right. Let me bring in Ambassador Shilkant Sharma into the picture. Now, talking about the ASEAN countries, 4 of the top polluters are from this particular region, Ambassador. So how serious are the ASEAN countries really in trying to tackle this problem?
The ASEAN summit declarations have considerable importance. They are actually, they reflect the commitment of the leaders at the highest level to a particular agenda for action. So this removing the marine debris now has attracted the attention at the highest level in these countries. And the declaration is very unreserved. It doesn't give any escape clauses. Of course, everything which ASEAN does has to be implemented by the member states, because ASEAN itself doesn't have, like it has an ASEAN secretariat, but it is a facilitator. It is not an implementer in a sense. So it will be left to the countries concerned. And since the 4 most polluting countries are in the ASEAN region, it boils down to them taking action. Now, the very first action is to reduce, and to prevent further accumulation of this plastic waste. And for that, you have already these movements in the West, where you've had these children who from school who sat down and who opposed use of plastics, things like using plastic straws, and all these things which are actually at the level of culture. There also action is required. They can be easily done by countries concerned nationally. There is, in the economies also, there is a lot of consumer driven economies. Now, as you know, when you have more consumption, there is more waste. So at the root of consumption, there is need for them to prevent, resort to these things like plastics and single-use plastics. As much as possible, they should be ruled out from consumption.
Right.
That movement is also incipient in India itself, where there is insistence now, like the actions like in Delhi, they generally say that don't use single-use plastics, and paper bags and plastic bags have to be, they are the curse to humanity. So all these things will be required to be done concertedly in all these Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand and Vietnam.
All right. It's a gigantic problem and we need a concerted effort to really deal with this particular issue is what you're suggesting. And let's hope that the ASEAN countries actually do something about it now that we have a declaration on this particular issue. Let me bring in Simran Sodhi into the picture now. You know, as far as the ASEAN countries are concerned, what has been the experience in the past really when it comes to issues like this and how they have dealt with them?
See, I think we have to take it with a pinch of salt. ASEAN countries, at the end of the day, despite this being an organization where you have member states, they come together and there are declarations passed. But once the summit gets over and every member state is going back to running its own country, we find that the implementation has not been that strong. It should be stronger. And as you pointed out, the case of China is such a huge aggressive power today that for anyone, forget ASEAN today, we have seen what is happening between US and China, the trade wars. It is very difficult today to deal with a country like China and tell it that, you know, your contribution to the world pollution, to the pollution in the ocean needs to step back and China needs to take some action, because we see this aggressive model which is focused on development, which is focused on being the world's fastest and greatest economy in a way. So I think what is required, that this is a very welcome move which the ASEAN nations have done. But some implementation is needed, some movement is needed which shows that this is more than just a talking table. You get together, you talk and you have great worded declarations, but the homework has to be done. And China, Vietnam, everyone has to come back maybe at the next summit and say that, you know, the last time this was the problem, this was how much, say, China was contributing to the marine pollution and this is how much we have reduced it. Unless and until you have real figures and facts on the table that each country is actually doing something, it is not a very positive or optimistic view forward, and we will see the situation only getting worse, I think, as we move forward.
All right, absolutely. You know, talking is one aspect, but action is needed on the ground really if we have to move forward. You know, talking about action, SK Sarkar, do we have any new technologies, anything on the anvil that the world is using, that we in India are using to try and deal with this particular problem?
You see, when we are talking about ocean pollution, we have to take into consideration the fact that 80% of the discharge into the ocean are coming from the land itself. So in the land, let's take the industrial activity. If the industrial effluent are not treated, it goes to the mother earth and ultimately it goes to the either through drains or the pipelines to the water, to the river or to the sea itself. So to check the effluent, you need a different kind of approach for a common effluent treatment plant. That what we have seen in the case of Ganga cleaning exercise, you know. So there the new technology has been used in the case of effluent treatment of the municipal waste or the industrial waste, and those kind of technology is required to prevent that kind of pollution coming into the ocean or the river. But in the case of plastic, you will not get that kind of solution, because plastic is it is not a biodegradable kind of material. So there itself we have to have a different approach. For example, the approach is that not to reduce the use of single use plastic, recycle whatever is available. But then there we have to incentivize the rag pickers who are collecting the plastic for collection and the reuse it. But then how to incentivize? The responsibility should be on the producers through the principle, through the approach called EPR, extended producer's responsibility, you know. So the producer has to take the responsibility of the fact that the post consumption outcome has to be their responsibility. So whereas the technologies are available in the case of other types of pollution which are polluting the sea, in other cases the big menace is the plastic. In the case of ocean pollution, the big menace, for example, the micro beads, the micro beads, if it is normally it affects the marine species. So, use of less microbits in our daily use is one of the thing, one of the steps one can take. So, there are many steps where individual has to take, where the industrial machinery has to take, where the population has to take as in general.
Sure. So it has to be a holistic approach really with everyone involved, and only then can we tackle this problem is what you're suggesting. All right, let me go across to Jyoti Parekh now. So what has been done really in recent times as far as the international community is concerned to try and deal with this problem?
No, I think we need to combine the technology as well as the regulatory measures as well as the lifestyle changes, and three together can make some difference. Also pricing issues, and I agree that it should be a quantitative target. Let's say if you are producing 300 million tons, let's go for 20% reduction by certain date. I would say less than 3 to 4 years, and work towards that, just as we are doing in case of climate change, that pollution must be reduced by certain percentage by certain dates, and then go accordingly for the programs that are necessary and that will be more effective. Now, although it's nice that ASEAN has taken leadership, this is a global phenomena, of course, and I'm sure it is linked with global measures, because many times it's not, one doesn't know from where the pollution comes, and certainly ASEAN can do its own bit for that, but there is also Sustainable Development Goal 14, which expects that we will prevent the marine pollution and marine debris and nutrient pollution. So also fertilizers, pesticides, all these also cause pollution. So we need to look at all kinds of disturbances in ocean. Also climate change would mean sea level rise, and that would also raise already it has raised 5 centimeters, but it could do, now they are saying much more than that, and that then comes into the freshwater resources of rivers and so on. So, and all of us are carrying so much pollution in our bodies, ourselves already. So it has to be a much bigger and global approach to address this, and I hope that there are linkages and other people will be also mobilized to join this
So
ASEAN initiative.
A much bigger initiative, a much bigger goal is really required to try and tackle this problem is what you're suggesting. Ambassador, how much of traction do you see this particular issue getting at the G20 summit later this week?
I think ASEAN's contribution should be catalytic, or at least should provide a kernel around which the G20 could also reinforce decisions in this regard. You know, ASEAN, the importance is that they have a marine ambience. Indonesia, for instance, has hundreds of islands. You know, they are spread over. If you go to ASEAN countries, their food is mainly seafood, and plastic pollution actually directly goes into the fish, goes into your food chain. So they have a direct risk coming from this. The second aspect is that, you know, this over the last 25 years all over the world, this water pollution has created this totally artificial culture of bottles, plastic bottles, and there are all kinds of bottles. India, for instance, now under our Prime Minister has started this whole talk of Nal Se Jal, you know, there should be tap water. So this tap water is the requirement. You know, if you can convert this back to the system where water is through the tap, then all these plastic bottles will come down. So, you know, as was stated earlier, it is a cultural transformation which is required to prevent further accumulation of this marine plastic debris. And then there are technological solutions in the sense that they are now developing submarine vehicles, you know, submarine, what you can say, vessels which can go into removing plastics which are accumulated at the ocean floor. because it keeps going there. And there's a lot of literature about it, which our technical people should know. And since Singapore and Malaysia and Indonesia and China, they are all into technology, so they should be able to cope with this problem in technology.
Right.
So G20 in its technology emphasis, and also in the emphasis on consumption, should look at this problem constructively.
Sure.
So ASEAN effort actually is welcome, because they are going to give into, they will feed into the G20 processes.
All
the
right.
ASEAN members who are also in the G20.
All right.
And the ASEAN plus 4, like China, India, we are all members of G20.
Right, okay.
So in that process.
So Simran Sodhi, so that having been said, how serious is the world really, do you think, in trying to tackle this particular problem?
I think we have a real problem, because we have the world leader, the US under Donald Trump, not really taking climate change or these issues very seriously. We've had President Trump very publicly say that climate change is basically a hoax. So I think that's a huge source of worry for anyone who cares about the way pollution is destroying our planet today. But I think at the same time we have hope in other world leaders. We have seen our own Prime Minister and the French President come together, and the International Solar Alliance coming into formation. So I think as long as you have leaders who are going to balance out and I don't see a change in President Trump's philosophy of not believing that the planet is getting warmer and this is a serious issue. But as long as you have leaders like our Prime Minister and the French President, and we have seen the International Solar Alliance is a brilliant idea, it's taking off. There are countries even like Saudi Arabia which have come on board, and there are projects underway. So I think we need to constantly keep coming up with ideas which are actually tackling this problem. At the same time, we have to find a way to engage with the US, some way of engaging with President Trump, and I wish there was some way of convincing him that climate change is not really a hoax, and what we are seeing, the droughts, the world getting warmer, the summers getting hotter, this is all very real. We all see this happening. But I also feel that as long as the US is not on board, because the US at the end of the day has the latest technology, it also has this strong willpower globally to push smaller countries to do things which they might not be willing to do on their own. Could be financial, could just be a leadership issue. It can push smaller countries to take the lead in climate change. So I hope the US changes its stance, but I think the positive thing is that we have something like the International Solar Alliance, we have leaders like the French President, our own PM taking the lead. So I think we are balancing it out, but my worry remains the US under President Trump.
Okay, closing comments now from all my guests. I'm going to ask you to be brief because we've got limited time on the program, on what's the best way forward, starting first with you, SK Sarkar.
I just want to give one simple example. You see, in India, if you take the municipal waste, the 80% of the municipal waste are collected, and only 20 out of that, only 20% are treated. So what happened to the rest? It goes down to the drain, it goes down to the water, it goes down to the sea or the river itself. So we can do a lot as far as we are concerned, as a collectively, and also as individual members. So there are enough things to be done to tackle this ocean pollution or river pollution, marine pollution in a bigger way.
So it has to start at the lowest level and then go up, and then we can deal with this entirely, is what you're suggesting. Jyoti Parekh, the best way forward?
Yes, I think as I said, we need to start, of course, with the lowest, with us. It has to start with us, but lifestyle changes and regulatory issues, that this will not be permitted, this will not be allowed, these processes are forbidden, these kind of legislations would have to be there before industrial business houses will change their processes. So if it's costlier, then so be it. We all have to pay price for whatever that is. So we should. It has to extend to not only all of us, but business processes, government regulations, global alliances, and as we cannot do alone, ASEAN cannot do alone, it has to be a global approach, and we need to see that this it becomes a movement, and examine every aspects and how we can substitute plastic with what first of all just eliminate plastic as much as possible,
Right.
and when it's not possible, let us try to substitute it with another biodegradable materials.
Sure.
So all these cannot happen unless there are some rules which and regulations. So what is it that what processes are admissible and possible is something that we have to come up jointly some kind of a plan.
Okay, all right, Ambassador.
A roadmap has to be.
Ambassador Shilkant Sharma, your closing comments.
For a quantity.
Well, the imperative action lies in the hands of national governments, and they should be compelled by the groupings, like ASEAN should compel its member states to take action. Same way, G20 decision should be also imperative for national governments, member states to take. And there the kind of regulatory requirements, there the kind of change in the consumption patterns. The industries should be taxed heavily for on the basis of waste that produce, and especially the waste which goes into the marine environment. So you need to change the economic pattern also. I find that in the this growth pattern which was based on Washington Consensus, it has led to completely runaway consumption.
Right.
And runaway exploitation of resources without any care for environment, for climate, and that has to be changed. The positive side is that these countries which are still developing, like Vietnam, and so they could take a development route which is a little more environment friendly, rather
Right.
than following the mad route taken by the more developed countries. And
Sure.
China particularly has to take the lead, and China can take lead. When they take a decision, they go about it more systematically.
All right.
So they can be also the lead. India already is doing a lot of things here. We find in our midst a growing consciousness in our urban planning.
Okay,
Because
Ambassador, I'll have to interrupt you because I'm
cursor-
running out of time on the program. A quick closing comment from Simran Sodhi to close the show for us.
I think we have to do a two-sided approach. The individuals have to make individual changes, like stop using plastic bottles, take a bottle from home, a glass bottle which you can reuse again and again. But I think at the government level it is very important. We have seen France has banned the use of plastic cutlery. So the role of the government at the top and people changing their daily habits, I think combining those two, we will see some positive forward movement.
Okay, we need to see a lifestyle change really as far as we as individuals are concerned, some policy changes maybe as far as the government is concerned, and together we can deal with this problem collectively is what the panelists here are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.